Hello, it is Whovian Monday, and today I will be talking about Mummy on the Orient Express, the 8th episode of Doctor Who Series 8. I'm going to start with my little recap as usual. I'm going to try and keep it short. I am almost definitely going to fail. As always, do not watch this if you haven't seen the episode. We start with a clock ticking down from 66 seconds. We are on a train in space. An elderly lady can see a mummy walking towards her, but nobody else can see it, including her granddaughter Maisie. At the end of the 66 seconds, the lady is dead. Credits. I love the presence of the ticking clock throughout the episode. I love how it actually appeared on screen. And the mummy looked great as well. It was a very impressive mummy. After the credits, the TARDIS lands and the Doctor and Clara step out all dressed up. This was a little bit of a surprise after the previous episode, and it kind of distanced me from Clara a little bit while I tried to work out what had happened and how we had got to this place. The Doctor explains that they are on a replica of the Orient Express. It is just like the Orient Express, except bigger and in space. We enter a carriage and a dance is going on. Foxes is singing Don't Stop Me Now. It turns out that Fox's guest starring role is actually more of a cameo than anything else. The Doctor thought that this would be a good trip to end on. Clara says that she hated him for weeks, but she doesn't hate him. She just can't carry on doing this anymore, not the way that he does it. They meet Maisie and Quell, the ship's captain. When Quell is introduced to the Doctor, he says that they have doctors and professors coming out of their ears on this trip, which is interesting. They find out about the body and the mummy, but they both decide that nothing weird is going on, everything is fine, this is their last hurrah. Later on they're in their separate cabins. Clara is talking to Danny on the phone. He says she should enjoy her non-dangerous space train. In his own cabin, the Doctor is talking to himself. I'm liking this part of Peter Capaldi's Doctor. I like his conversations that he has on his own. He decides to go and investigate. He ums and ahs about taking Clara with him, but eventually decides no. His investigation leads him to the chair the lady died on and to Perkins, chief engineer. Clara is also now wandering about and bumps into Maisie, who wants to go and see her gran. She hasn't been allowed to see her, and she can't get through the door to the room where the body is until she hits the control panel with her shoe. And then her and Clara move off into the room and the door closes behind them. The Doctor is now talking to Professor Emil Morehouse about the foretold. The foretold is a myth of a creature who can only be seen by those who it is about to kill. It kills in 66 seconds, and apparently, according to legend, there is a safe word which will stop it. Morehouse is an expert in this field, just happens to be on the trip as well. Odd. And there's a nice Jelly Babies reference. During this scene we have another ticking clock in the corner of the screen, and it ends with a chef being killed by the mummy. Quell then tries to cover up this death. Clara is now apparently trying to get back through the door that she and Maisie went through. Apparently they are now trapped in the room. This isn't made the most clear. Maisie talks about her fractious relationship with her gran, and they see a sarcophagus at the end of the room. The Doctor has caught up with Quell and is now pretending to be a mystery shopper, because apparently this is Quell's greatest fear. The Doctor wants them to do something, because the bodies are piling up. Perkins is waiting outside with some research. It turns out he's been looking into the deaths already. Back in the sarcophagus room, Clara and Maisie seem to have become resigned to their fate and are now having a little heart-to-heart. They're talking about Clara's relationship with the Doctor. Clara says you can't end on a slammed door, but Maisie is like, yes, you can do that. That is a perfectly acceptable way of ending things. The Doctor, Perkins and Morehouse are watching footage of the deaths later on. When the latter two are asleep, the Doctor manages to get a phone and calls Clara. Eventually, when she is able to get a word in edgeways, she says that she is trapped. He can't open the door, but the sarcophagus opens instead. But it's only full of bubble wrap. The Doctor is handcuffed by Quell, who now knows that he is not a mystery shopper. But then there is another ticking clock, and a guard dies in a room full of passengers, and Quell lets him go. He has decided to stop turning a blind eye to all of these mysterious deaths. The Doctor talks to the passengers about the foretold. He thinks that somebody has orchestrated this whole thing to bring all of these experts together. On cue, the engines stop and the carriage becomes a lab. Some of the passengers disappear. Apparently they were just fake passengers to make up the numbers. A mysterious voice called Gus tells them that it is their job to study and stop the foretold. He shows them a scroll which was found with the foretold. Then there is another ticking clock and Morehouse is killed, describing the mummy as he goes. They get to work. Clara and Maisie are now researching the sarcophagus, and she calls the Doctor. Apparently other ships had previously disappeared, unable to solve the mystery. Gus isn't happy with the call being made and decompresses an area of kitchen staff. The doctors and professors work out that the Foretold chooses its victims by targeting the weakest, either physically or psychologically. They conclude that Quell will be next. He suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. He used to be a soldier. Then promptly there is a new clock and the Foretold goes after Quell. There is a wonderful shot where the mummy passes through the doctor, and they also work out that it can teleport, and then Quell is dead at 0. So they now have more information to go on. This is an interesting idea, the idea of the more people who die, the more chance they have of saving everybody else. The Doctor works out that to teleport means tech. It has been around for centuries, so ancient tech. The Foretold drains energy from the living. Perkins says that it takes about a minute to move energy out of phase. They work out that Maisie will be the next victim. The Doctor wants Clara to bring her to them by lying and saying that he can save her. So she does. And they leave because apparently they can now get through the door because the computer wants them to get through the door. On the way, Clara sees that the TARDIS is surrounded by a force field. When back with the Doctor, Clara learns that somebody had been trying to get the Doctor on this ship for a while, even calling the TARDIS phone. So it wasn't a jolly after all. He knew that something was likely to happen. Maisie sees the Foretold, but the Doctor transfers her thoughts to himself, so the Foretold will think that he is Maisie. The clock starts ticking down for him. There's a lovely little "Are You My Mummy" reference. I enjoyed this little scene where the Doctor was working on the problem with the Foretold, but also working on Maisie's issues with her grandmother. He works out that the scroll is in fact a flag and the mummy is in fact a soldier. He says, "We surrender," and the Foretold stops and everybody can see it, and it salutes to him, and then it disintegrates, and it leaves its teleporter behind. So they have solved the mystery, but Gus starts removing air from the train because survivors are not required. The Doctor is trying to manipulate the teleporter to get them to safety, and then the train explodes, and Clara wakes up on a beach with the Doctor. The Doctor says that the teleporter got everybody to the TARDIS, and then he dropped them all off on the nearest planet. He says that he tried to hack Gus, but Gus wasn't a big fan of that, and he blew up the train. There's another nice little scene between them. The Doctor says that he thought he could probably save Maisie, but he didn't want to let Gus know. So Clara says, "He was just pretending to be heartless then." The Doctor says, "Would you like to think that about me? Would that make it easier?" And then he says my favourite line of the episode, which is, "Sometimes the only choices you have are bad ones, but you still have to choose." Back on the TARDIS, Perkins is still there. The Doctor wants him to stay for a bit, but Perkins declines and leaves. It could change a man. The Doctor and Clara have another nice little chat, a lot calmer than the previous episode. They're talking about addiction, adventure, and danger as addiction. Clara talks to Danny on the phone and then tells the Doctor that Danny said that it was fine for her to continue knocking about with the Doctor. She lies and says that it was Danny's idea for her to stop travelling with him in the first place. Clara is sorry about her wobble, and they ride off into the sunset for more adventures. Was anybody expecting this at the end? Because it was a bit of a surprise for me. It was a bit of a turnaround. After the previous episode, I thought we were going to have a little bit of a break between them. I thought that she would be back, but I didn't think that it would be so soon. But I would assume that there were going to be some serious consequences from this turnaround, and that this isn't the last we'll hear of Clara being addicted to journeying with the Doctor. So what did you think about this episode? I liked this episode. I liked it a lot. I thought it was a good episode. However, I personally find it to be best when I don't think about it too much. There were new characters with backstories and relationships, there were mysteries and plot development, but because there was so much stuff, we never went into that much detail. I had a few little questions by the end, and they weren't all answered. I thought it was a well-written episode for the most part. There were some great lines and some excellent dialogues. There were some more questions posed about Gus and all of these calls to the TARDIS. We're getting to the tail end of the series, so I would hope that some of these questions are going to start being answered soon. I thought this was a great Doctor episode. I felt like I knew him better by the end of the episode because there was relatively less Clara compared to some previous episodes. There was more chance for him to shine. I kind of feel like this is the first episode this series where I have been seeing the Doctor through my own eyes, if that makes sense. In previous episodes I felt a little bit like I've been seeing the Doctor through Clara's eyes, or I've been seeing him through the eyes of Danny or another guest. But this episode, as I mentioned at the start, I didn't latch on to Clara and I didn't latch on to another guest, which gave me the opportunity to latch on to the Doctor. My main little disappointment from this episode was that the end of the last episode was so powerful that I kind of wanted there to be more repercussions. Although there's still time, of course. But don't get me wrong, I am happy that they are back together because I have been loving Clara this series, and I love the double act between Capaldi and Coleman. Those are my thoughts on the episode. If you don't like them, I have others. Great, the next episode is episode 9, Flatline. This is also written by Jamie Matheson and directed by Douglas McKinnon. The synopsis: separated from the Doctor, Clara discovers a new menace from another dimension. But how do you hide when even the walls are no protection? With people to save and no madman in a box to help, Clara goes against an enemy that exists beyond normal human perception. What did you think of Mummy on the Orient Express? I'd be very interested to hear your opinions. It wasn't one of my favourites of the series, but I did really like it. I hope you have a good day and see you tomorrow.